I found out my girlfriend had 4 other boyfriends. I contacted them all. For her birthday, we threw her a surprise party. She walked in to see all 5 of us standing there together. I handed her a cake that said, "Happy birthday to our girlfriend." My girlfriend Jessica is a miracle of modern logistics. For the last year, I thought I was in a normal, committed relationship with a vibrant, if slightly chaotic, woman. I had no idea I was actually just one part of a complex, multi-layered romantic enterprise. Jessica wasn't just my girlfriend. She was the CEO of a startup with 5 active clients, and we were all her boyfriend. I discovered this last Tuesday by complete accident. Jessica is pathologically careless with her phone. She left it in my car when I dropped her off at her yoga class. I found it on the passenger seat an hour later, and being the good boyfriend, I decided to drive it back to her so she wouldn't be without it. As I was pulling up to her yoga studio, the phone screen lit up. A notification from a guy named Derek, work, with a heart emoji next to his name. The message read, "Thinking about you. Last night was amazing." My heart stopped. Last night, she had been with me. We had watched a movie and fallen asleep on the sofa. Then another notification popped up. A guy named Steve, Jim. The message, "Can't wait for our hike this weekend, beautiful." We were supposed to be going to my parents' house this weekend. It was like a switch flipped in my head. The confusion and hurt were there, but they were immediately overtaken by a cold, morbid curiosity. My hands shaking, I opened her phone. She had used her fingerprint to unlock it in my car earlier, so it was still open. I didn't go digging deep. I didn't have to. The main screen of her messaging app was a switchboard of deception. There was Derek, her work husband, who she was clearly sleeping with. There was Steve, her personal trainer, who was more than just a trainer. There was a long-distance guy named Paul, an old flame from college, to whom she was promising to visit soon on a girls' trip. And then there was me, Ben, the stable, reliable, live-in boyfriend, the anchor of the entire operation. I felt a wave of nausea followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. But then a third feeling emerged, something far more dangerous, a sense of profound, analytical focus. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a master scheduler, a brilliant con artist. A betrayal this complex, this audacious, didn't deserve a simple, screaming confrontation. It deserved a response of equal complexity and creativity. I drove home, her phone still in my hand. I spent the next 5 hours in a state of hyper-focused investigation. I went through her messages, her calendar, her social media. I was no longer her boyfriend. I was an auditor, examining the books of a fraudulent corporation. It was worse than I thought. There wasn't just 4 other boyfriends, there were 5. The 5th was a wealthy, older, divorced man named Marcus, who she had listed in her phone as mentor. He was the one funding the designer bags and expensive spa days she claimed she was paying for with her freelance graphic design work. Each of us served a purpose. I was the stable home base. Derek was the daily thrill at the office. Steve was the fitness-obsessed hobby partner. Paul was the romantic, long-distance fantasy, and Marcus was the bank. She had built a perfect ecosystem of men, each one fulfilling a different need, all of them completely unaware of the other's existence. By the end of the night, I had a complete dossier. I had their full names, their photos, their phone numbers, and a collection of screenshots of her messages to each of them, detailing her lies and her schedule. My plan began to form. A private confrontation would be pointless. She was a professional liar. She would just create a new lie. No, the only way to properly address a deception of this magnitude was to bring all the deceived parties together. The only way to show her the truth of what she had done was to have all 5 of her boyfriends in the same room at the same time. Her birthday was in 3 weeks. She was already dropping hints about wanting a big surprise party. She had no idea what kind of surprise I was about to start planning. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and sent the first text message to a man I had never met. "Hi Derek. My name is Ben. We don't know each other, but we have a girlfriend in common. Her name is Jessica. I have some information I think you'll want to see. We need to talk." I sent the same message customized with the right name to Steve, Paul, and Marcus. The game was on. Update 1. Assembling what I came to call the Jessica Avengers was a delicate and surreal process. The initial reactions to my text message ranged from angry disbelief to cautious curiosity. Derek, the work husband, was the most aggressive. He called me immediately, accusing me of being a crazy, jealous ex trying to stir up trouble. "I don't know who you are, man," he said, "but you need to back off. Jessica and I are just friends." "Are you?" I asked calmly. "Because according to this text she sent you last Monday, she was telling you how much she missed you while she was lying in bed next to me. I'm happy to forward you the screenshot. Or perhaps you'd prefer the one where she's telling me she has to work late on a project with you, while simultaneously texting you plans for a romantic dinner?" There was a stunned silence. I had his attention. Steve, the gym guy, was just confused. Paul, the long-distance fantasy, was heartbroken. But the most interesting reaction came from Marcus, the older, wealthy benefactor. He wasn't angry. He was intrigued. He was a retired businessman, a man who had seen it all, and he seemed almost impressed by the audacity of her scheme. I arranged to meet with each of them individually over the next week. I met them in quiet bars and coffee shops. I was not emotional. I was a presenter, laying out my findings with the cold, hard data of screenshots and calendar entries. I showed each of them the lies she had told them, and the lies she had told about them. I showed Derek the messages where she called him her fun, disposable distraction. I showed Steve the texts where she mocked his obsession with fitness. I showed Marcus the evidence that she was using the money he gave her to fund her trips to see her long-distance boyfriend, Paul. With each man, the reaction was the same. A slow, dawning horror, followed by a cold, quiet rage. I had presented them with undeniable proof that they were not a special partner in a secret affair. They were just a cog in a machine. By the end of the week, I had them all on board. We created a private, secure group chat. The five of us, a motley crew of betrayed men, began to plan. The initial ideas were a mix of petty revenge and grand gestures, but we all agreed that the punishment had to fit the crime. Her crime was deception, compartmentalization, and making us all feel like we were the only one. The only logical revenge then was to shatter that illusion in the most public and undeniable way possible. The surprise birthday party was the perfect venue. I, as the live-in boyfriend, took the lead on planning. I told Jessica that I was going to throw her a massive surprise party at our apartment. I told her I wanted to make her birthday the most special day of her life. She was ecstatic. She loved the idea of me, her stable, boring boyfriend, fawning over her and organizing a huge event in her honor. We set the date and time. I told her she needed to be out of the apartment for the entire afternoon so I could decorate and get everything ready. I told her to dress up, that it was going to be a fancy affair. She bought a new, expensive dress for the occasion, probably with Marcus's money. The five of us coordinated the logistics. Derek was in charge of getting a banner made. Steve, the gym guy, handled the drinks. Paul, the long-distance boyfriend, agreed to drive into town for the event. And Marcus, with a wry smile, said he would take care of the cake. The plan was simple. There would be no other guests, no friends, no family. The only attendees at Jessica's surprise party would be her five boyfriends. We would all gather at my apartment an hour before she was due to arrive. We would set the scene. And then we would wait. She thought she was walking into a party celebrating her. She had no idea she was walking into a final, public shareholder meeting for the failed corporation of her love life, and her employment was about to be terminated. Update 2. The day of the party was one of the most surreal of my life. The four other men arrived at my apartment at 6 o'clock sharp. It was the first time we had all been in the same room together. The atmosphere was a strange mix of tension, camaraderie, and a shared, grim sense of purpose. We were five strangers from completely different walks of life, united by the lies of one woman. Derek, the work husband, unrolled the banner. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It just said, in big, cheerful letters, "Happy birthday." No name, just a general, impersonal declaration. We hung it over the living room window. Steve, the gym guy, stocked the fridge with an impressive amount of beer and champagne. "Might as well have a real party after the guest of honor leaves," he said with a wry grin. Paul, the long-distance boyfriend, had a haunted look in his eyes. The betrayal seemed to have hit him the hardest. He just quietly helped arrange the furniture. And then Marcus, the benefactor, arrived. He was carrying a large, square cake box from the most expensive bakery in the city. He placed it on the kitchen counter with the reverence of a man handling a sacred object. "The inscription is exactly as we discussed," he said, a glint in his eye. We spent the next hour making small talk, a group of men who should have been rivals, now allies in a common cause. We compared stories, laughed at the audacity of her lies, and discovered the intricate web of scheduling she had used to keep us all apart. It was like a support group for the victims of a charismatic cult leader. At 7:45, I received a text from Jessica. "Just left the spa, so excited for my surprise. Be there in 15 minutes, love you, so." I showed the text to the others. A quiet, determined silence fell over the room. It was time. We took our positions. We arranged ourselves in a casual semicircle in the middle of the living room, facing the front door. We just stood there, 5 men, waiting. At exactly 8 o'clock, we heard her key in the lock. The door swung open. Jessica stepped inside, a brilliant, beaming smile on her face, ready to be showered with affection. "Surprise!" she called out into the apartment. Her smile faltered the moment she saw us. It didn't vanish immediately. It just froze, her brain struggling to process the scene in front of her. She saw me. Then she saw Derek next to me. Her eyes widened. She saw Steve on my other side. Her face went pale. She saw Paul by the window and Marcus leaning against the kitchen counter. The color drained from her face. Her designer handbag slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a soft thud. She looked like she had walked into a room and found all of her secret lives having a meeting without her. What is this?" she stammered, her voice a hoarse whisper. "What are you all doing here?" No one said a word. We just stood there, a silent jury. I stepped forward. I was holding the cake. With a calm, steady hand, I lifted the lid off the box and turned it so she could read the beautiful, swirling blue icing. It said, "Happy birthday to our girlfriend." The silence was broken by a small, choked gasp from Jessica. She stared at the cake, then at our faces, her expression crumbling from confusion into pure, unadulterated horror. She tried to lie. It was a desperate, pathetic final gambit. "I don't understand," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. "Ben, who are all these men? Why are they in our apartment?" Derek was the first to speak. "Don't, Jessica," he said, his voice cold. "Just don't. We know everything. I'm the work husband. I'm the personal trainer," Steve added, his arms crossed. "I'm the old college friend," Paul said, his voice full of a quiet sadness. "And I," Marcus concluded, pushing himself off the counter, "am the mentor and the chief financial backer of this entire sordid little enterprise, apparently." She looked at me, her last hope. "Ben, please," she whispered, "tell me this is a joke." "The only joke here, Jessica," I said, my voice flat, "was me, was all of us, but it's not funny anymore." I placed the cake on the coffee table. "The party's over," I said. "Happy birthday." Final update: the scene in the apartment after the cake reveal was a complete and total meltdown. Jessica's brain seemed to short-circuit. Faced with the impossible reality of all her separate lives colliding in one room, she didn't have a coherent strategy. She just cycled through every manipulative tactic in her arsenal. First, she tried denial, insisting we were all crazy, that we were all part of some elaborate prank I was playing. When that didn't work, she tried to isolate and conquer, turning to each of us individually. She tried to tell Derek that the others meant nothing. She tried to tell Paul that he was the only one she ever really loved. It was a pathetic performance, and none of us were buying it. We just stood there, a silent, unmovable wall of truth. Finally, she turned to rage. She screamed at me, calling me a monster for orchestrating her humiliation. She called the others fools for believing me. It was a wild, desperate tirade from a cornered animal. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke. "It's over, Jessica," I said calmly. "This is my apartment. The lease is in my name. I want you out. You can pack a bag with your essentials tonight. You have 1 week to get the rest of your things." Then, one by one, the other men delivered their own verdicts. "We're done," Derek said. "Don't ever contact me again," Steve added. Paul just shook his head and walked out the door without a word. Marcus, the businessman, was the most cutting. "Consider my mentorship and all associated financial benefits permanently concluded," he said. "I suggest you find a new investor." Within the space of 15 minutes, she had been dumped simultaneously by 5 different men. She left that night with a single suitcase, her face a tear-streaked ruin. The five of us, the newly formed Brotherhood of the Betrayed, actually stayed for a while. We opened the champagne, we cut the cake. It was delicious, and we had our own very strange, very cathartic party. We toasted to our shared freedom. The aftermath was exactly as you would expect. Jessica's life imploded. She had lost her home, her primary source of stability, her work distraction, her hobby partner, her romantic fantasy, and her bank, all in one night. The story of her 5-boyfriend surprise party became a legend in our respective social circles. She was a pariah. She tried a few desperate moves. She sent me a series of threatening emails, demanding I pay her for her emotional investment in our relationship. I had my lawyer send her a cease and desist letter that shut that down immediately. She tried to spin a victim narrative online, but the story was too well known. Everyone knew the truth. The last I heard, she had to move back to her hometown to live with her parents, completely disgraced. The grand, exciting life she had built for herself was revealed to be a fragile house of cards, and we had just gently blown it over. A month after the party, the 5 of us met up for a beer. It was a bizarre but hilarious evening. We were 5 completely different guys, but we had a bond that no one else could understand. Marcus, who had done some digging, informed us that Jessica had a long history of this kind of behavior. We weren't the first, but thanks to our little party, we were almost certainly the last. As for me, my life is peaceful. The apartment is quiet. I didn't seek revenge out of rage. I did it as a matter of principle. She treated people like disposable assets, like items on a checklist. I simply organized a meeting of all the assets to compare notes. She wasn't a girlfriend, she was a Ponzi scheme, and all I did was call a meeting of the investors to inform them that the fund was bankrupt. I overheard my wife tell her mother I would make the perfect ex-husband because I'm too nice to fight for anything in court. That weekend, I quietly hired a lawyer and filed first. She was served at dinner in front of her entire family. She hasn't stopped crying since. I'm not the type to air dirty laundry online, but this one's been burning a hole in my chest. If I don't write it out, I might start pacing holes in my hardwood. I'm 38, work in logistics, mostly contracts, fleet operations, nothing flashy. I like clean shirts, quiet mornings, and my coffee black. Married for 6 years to Rachel, 36. She teaches English at the high school down the road. We met through friends, clicked over a shared love of early 80s movies and lazy Sundays. I thought we had a solid thing. Not exciting, maybe, but honest. Turns out, I was the only one playing it straight. Last Saturday, I was in the crawl space under the laundry room rerouting a drain pipe. Not a glamorous way to spend a weekend, but I prefer doing things myself. There's an old heating vent that runs straight up through the floor into the guest room closet. Normally it's nothing, but when voices carry down from that room, they come through clearer than you'd think. Rachel was up there with her mother. Her voice dropped that performative sweetness she uses with strangers and got sharper, casual, like she was catching up over wine. They didn't know I was below them, wrenches clanking, headlamp on. What I heard stopped me cold. "I told you, Mom, he's not gonna fight me on anything. He's too nice," Rachel said, laughing. "I could clean him out, and he'd probably apologize for making it difficult." Her mother laughed. "He really is the perfect ex-husband. The kind who'll sign whatever you put in front of him just to be done with it." Then she added something that flipped a switch in my brain. "I've already looked into it. If I file, I can probably keep the house and get spousal. He makes more than enough." I didn't move. Just crouched there, hands still gripping the P-trap, listening to my wife and her mother plan how to dismantle my life, calmly, methodically. The same way I'd seen carriers try to weasel out of freight claims. Except this was my marriage, my home. They didn't say anything about cheating, not directly, but Rachel did mention how someone like her shouldn't waste her best years babysitting a man with no ambition. I waited another 15 minutes down there. Let them finish. Let the rage cool until it turned to something harder, colder. Later that evening, she handed me a glass of wine and kissed my cheek like nothing happened. She watched a baking show on the couch, texting someone with a smile I didn't recognize. I sat beside her, nodded at the screen, and made a mental note to call the lawyer Monday. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to file first. By Monday morning, I had a consultation booked with a local firm. Not one of those billboards on the freeway places either. This was a guy named Wexler. Quiet office, clean desk, ex-military demeanor. He looked over my notes. Yes, I brought notes, and didn't blink once. You file first, you control the tempo, he said, flipping through a printout of our financials. She's banking on passivity. That's an opening. From that moment, I stopped reacting and started preparing. I didn't move out. I didn't start fights. I became invisible. I went to work like always, came home on time, did the dishes, cleaned the gutters. Routine was my shield. While Rachel spent her nights texting on the patio, glass of wine in hand, I sat in the guest room documenting every withdrawal she made from our joint account. I watched her Venmo her sister $500 and label it girls' trip. She hadn't told me about any trip. I made copies of everything. Statements, receipts, her recent Amazon sprees that included 2 suitcases and a new iPad. She didn't bother hiding it. She assumed I'd never question her spending. That was her mistake. Wexler connected me with a forensic accountant. Low-profile guy, didn't even have a sign on his door. I gave him everything. Turns out, Rachel had been slowly moving small amounts into an old account she never disclosed during our joint financial planning, under her maiden name. Sloppy. Predictable. We had a joint credit card too. I froze it, then opened one in my name only and rerouted all autopay bills. I didn't say a word. The next time she tried to buy a $200 throw blanket from some Instagram boutique, it got declined. She looked at the screen like it betrayed her. "What's going on with the card?" she asked, sitting across the dinner table. I shrugged, calm. "Must be fraud or something. I'll look into it." That night she texted her mom again. I know because she left her phone open on the couch while she showered. He's clueless. Probably forgot to pay the bill again. Can't wait to be done with this. I took a picture of that message too. Meanwhile, I went through the house cataloging everything that was mine before the marriage. Tools, furniture, even the old truck title. Wexler said it'd matter, especially since we were in an equitable distribution state. She thought she'd be walking off with the whole house. She didn't know I had bought it 2 years before we ever met, and still had the original deed. I also started recording any argument she initiated. Nothing illegal, just for my own safety. If she tried to twist anything later, I'd have timestamps, tone, and context. The best part? She started getting comfortable. That smug confidence that people show when they think they've already won. It was written all over her face every time she walked by, humming, phone in hand, half smiling at something she never shared. She wasn't prepared for what was coming. Because I wasn't building a defense, I was setting a trap. I filed at 3:45 p.m. on a Friday. It was done quietly, just the way I wanted it. No loud arguments, no crying fits, no pre-fight bluffing. Wexler sent the papers through the courthouse system and walked me through the next steps like a man coaching someone through a controlled detonation. Everything was timed. We would serve her on Sunday. Not just any Sunday, family dinner Sunday. Her mother, her sister, her brother-in-law, all sitting around the long oak table she inherited from her grandmother. She insisted we host it every other week. She wanted the house? Fine. Let her get served in it. Saturday came and went like any other day. She went to yoga, then brunch with her sister, then came home buzzed and talking about how we should probably go through the garage soon, figure out what we're keeping. I nodded, told her sure, whenever she wants. I watched her fold my future into a box in her head, thinking I'd be too weak or stunned to push back. I went to bed early. Didn't sleep much. Sunday morning, I vacuumed, cooked, kept the charade going. She noticed. "You're in a good mood," she said, pouring her second mimosa before noon. "Just trying to be helpful," I replied. By 4, the house smelled like roast and rosemary. She had jazz playing on the Bluetooth speaker and a new candle burning in the entryway. She looked like the poster child for Pinterest marriages. Her family showed up a little after 5, all at once like they always did. I shook hands, passed out drinks, played the role. I sat at the head of the table, same as every time. Rachel's mother sat beside her, the same woman who told my wife I was too soft to stand up for anything. We made it through salads, small talk, and half the roast. That's when the knock came. Rachel frowned. "Did you order something?" I shook my head. "Nope, probably a neighbor." I didn't move. I just chewed my food and let the silence stretch. She sighed and stood. I watched her walk barefoot toward the door, glass of wine still in hand. From the dining room, we heard the muffled exchange. Rachel Morgan? Yes. You've been served. Have a good evening. There was a pause. Then the unmistakable sound of a thick envelope being opened. The clink of her wine glass hitting the floor. She walked back into the dining room holding the paperwork like it was radioactive. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes scanned the top page over and over like the words would rearrange themselves if she stared long enough. Her mom looked up. What's going on? Rachel tried to speak. Nothing came out. I set down my fork. I filed, I said evenly. 3 days ago. I'm seeking sole ownership of the property, division of assets based on individual contribution, and I've already frozen all joint accounts. I'll move out once a temporary order is established. My attorney's contact information is in the packet. Her brother-in-law looked like he wanted to disappear. Her mother's jaw hung open. You can't just... I stood. Dinner was lovely. I'll leave you all to finish. And I walked out the front door. I didn't go far. Just drove to the park down the street and sat in the truck. Watched the sun drop below the tree line while the engine ticked quietly. I had a duffel bag in the back, change of clothes, charger, documents, everything I needed for a few days. I didn't want to be around when the fog lifted, and Rachel realized this wasn't a scare tactic. It was done. My phone lit up about 30 minutes later. First it was Rachel, then her mom, then Rachel again. No voicemails, just back-to-back calls like they thought sheer volume would change something. I didn't pick up. I spent the night at a buddy's house. He offered a whiskey and didn't ask questions. Monday morning, I met with Wexler again to finalize the asset disclosures and submit the supporting documentation. Every receipt, every screenshot, every payment trail. By Wednesday, Rachel's lawyer, some overworked local she probably found through Yelp, had already reached out with her counter-proposals. Wexler read them without flinching. They still think you're bluffing. He slid the packet back across the table. They want 50% of the house value, he said, plus temporary spousal support. No mention of her undisclosed account. No mention of her individual income. Nothing about the early withdrawals she made from the joint account over the past 3 months. I looked at the page, then looked up. Good, let's bury them in the paperwork. Rachel tried reaching out again that night. This time, a text. Please, can we just talk? I didn't mean it like that. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I stared at it, left it on read. By the weekend, her sister was messaging me too. Long paragraph about how divorce brings out the worst in people and how maybe you both overreacted. They were circling, testing for weakness, trying to find cracks in the wall. There weren't any. The best part? Rachel still hadn't grasped just how badly she'd miscalculated. She assumed community property meant the house was automatically split, but she never put her name on the title. She assumed she'd be entitled to alimony, but she'd been stashing money in an undeclared account for over a year, and she definitely didn't know I had the recordings. Nothing scandalous, just cold, casual statements like, he'd never fight me, he doesn't have it in him. I had all the fight she never thought I'd use. I just kept it under the surface. Her lawyer backed down on the spousal support after Wexler submitted her hidden account balance. They tried to argue the house was effectively marital property. Wexler buried them in ownership history and proof of separate maintenance. By the second week, Rachel finally stopped trying to argue and started trying to talk. I just wish you'd talk to me first. She wanted a conversation. After plotting a clean exit behind my back, after mocking me with her mother. But the time for talking had passed. I'd already said everything I needed to. With paperwork. By the end of the 3rd week, Rachel's calls had stopped. Her lawyer sent over a revised proposal. No claim on the house, no request for support, just a split of the remaining shared savings. Wexler looked at me across his desk. She's folding, he said. You want to negotiate or push for the full ruling? Let's wrap it clean, I said. No blood, just closure. We drafted our acceptance, signed, and filed. It was done. She got to keep her car, her personal savings, and a few pieces of furniture. I kept the house, the tools, and everything I owned before the marriage. There was nothing left to discuss. The night the final agreement was signed, I came home and cooked dinner in total silence. Not the kind that hurts. The kind that clears a room. I sat in the chair I'd picked out, slept in my bed without the sound of someone typing beside me, texting God knows who. She never moved back in. She never asked. A month later, I ran into her sister at the hardware store. She looked uncomfortable, but tried to play nice. "Rachel's been having a hard time," she said, watching my reaction. I just nodded. She said, "You changed." I looked at her then, not angry, not smug, just finished. No, she just finally saw the part of me she kept pretending didn't exist. Rachel's been texting every few weeks since. Always late at night. Always emotional. "I don't know who I am without you. I made a mistake. You didn't even give us a chance to fix it." I haven't replied, not once. She cried the day she was served. Her mother tried to step in, play damage control. They thought I'd melt the moment things got hard. They bet everything on me being the guy who never fights. But the truth is, I'm not the man who can't fight. I'm the man who waits for the right moment and hits where it counts. Edit, since people keep asking. Yes, the house was mine before marriage. She never contributed to the mortgage. That held up in court. No, she didn't cheat, not that I could prove. But the betrayal wasn't physical. It was strategic, and that's worse. No, I don't feel guilty. I gave her 6 years of stability, support, and honesty. She gave me a plan to walk away the moment it suited her. Yes, I'm seeing someone now. Quietly. She doesn't know about all this. Doesn't need to. Final thought. A man doesn't have to yell to be strong. Sometimes he just has to listen long enough to learn exactly where to cut and walk away while the pieces fall. In today's Reddit story, "I'm pregnant, but it's not yours." My wife smirked, demanding a divorce and alimony. I just nodded and let her think she won, until the day her church received the DNA results and labeled her an adulteress. I always imagined that if my marriage ever ended, it would be a slow, painful process. Years of resentment, therapy sessions that didn't work, maybe a dramatic fight leading to a quiet, inevitable separation. But no, she ended it with a smirk. I came home from work that evening, exhausted and ready to collapse on the couch. But as soon as I walked in, I knew something was off. She was sitting on the couch, perfectly still, waiting for me. No TV on, no music playing. Just her, sitting there like she was rehearsing a script. I barely had time to put my keys down before she dropped the bomb. "I'm pregnant." For a second, my brain didn't register anything but shock. We had talked about kids, but we weren't actively trying. Then she added, almost lazily, like she was discussing the weather, "But it's not yours." The room fell silent. She waited, watching for my reaction, waiting for me to break. I didn't. I didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even blink. So, she kept going. "I cheated," she shrugged. "It's been going on for a while, and honestly, I'm done pretending. I want a divorce." She said it like she was dumping an old pair of shoes, like our entire life together was just some phase she was over. Still, I said nothing. Her lips curled up in that smug, infuriating way. "Honestly, it's better this way. I've met someone else, someone I actually want a future with." There it was. She wasn't just leaving me, she was trading up. Or at least, that's what she thought. She let out a little laugh, as if trying to lighten the mood. "I know this sucks, but hey, we can do this like adults, right?" I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay even. "You're really sure about this?" Her smirk widened. 100%. Then she dropped the final insult. "Oh, and you'll still need to pay alimony." The words hit me like a brick to the chest. "Excuse me?" She waved a hand dismissively. "I sacrificed my career for this marriage. Will, I was a stay-at-home wife for years while you built your business. It's only fair." Fair. She cheated on me, got pregnant with another man's child, and was now demanding I fund her new life. I clenched my fist so tightly my nails dug into my palm. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I smiled. "I understand," I said softly. "But just to be sure, let's get a DNA test." Her smirk didn't waver. She actually laughed. "Oh my God, Will? Seriously? You think I'm lying? Fine. Whatever makes you sleep at night." She thought I was in denial. She thought I was pathetic. She had no idea what was coming. I walked into the courthouse with some hope left. I wasn't expecting to walk away completely free. But surely, there had to be some justice. I had proof she cheated. Proof the baby wasn't mine. Proof she was already living with another man. And yet, as I sat at the plaintiff's table, watching my soon-to-be ex-wife sit calmly across from me, it hit me. She wasn't nervous at all. If anything, she looked bored, like she already knew the outcome. The judge entered, an older man who had probably seen every kind of divorce case there was. He barely looked at me before turning to my wife's lawyer, and that's when I knew I was screwed. Her lawyer stood up first. A polished, confident guy in an expensive suit, the kind of guy who could probably argue that the sky was green and get half the jury to agree with him. Your Honor, my client was a devoted wife for 5 years. She put her career aside to support her husband while he built his business. She managed the home, took care of daily affairs, and made countless sacrifices. Now that the marriage has ended, she is left with no income, no financial stability, and no way to rebuild her life. I wanted to scream. She wasn't left with no income. She chose not to work. She wasn't left struggling. She had another man waiting for her. But none of that mattered, because her lawyer was good, really good. We asked that the court grant her spousal support so she may transition into independent life without undue hardship. Undue hardship. She cheated, got pregnant, and left me, but somehow, she was the victim. My lawyer, Mr. Bout Randall, stood up next. He was a no-nonsense guy, but I could tell he already knew we were fighting an uphill battle. Your Honor, let's be clear. My client is not refusing to support his ex-wife. He is, however, contesting an obligation to pay long-term alimony to a woman who is pregnant with another man's child and has already moved on. The judge raised an eyebrow. I saw a flicker of something, mild interest, annoyance. But then he gestured for Randall to continue. We have documented proof of her infidelity, proof that the child is not my client's, and proof that she's already cohabitating with another man. Randall turned, handing over the DNA test results, pictures, and text message logs. For the first time, my ex-wife shifted in her seat. She wasn't smirking anymore, but she still wasn't worried, and that's because her lawyer was ready. Your Honor, I'd like to remind the court that we live in a no-fault divorce state. That was it, the moment I knew we had already lost. The judge took a deep breath and sat back in his chair. Mr. Daniels, he said, looking at me for the first time. While the court acknowledges the infidelity, state law does not consider marital misconduct when determining spousal support. I swallowed hard. But, he held up a hand, what we do consider is financial need. I clenched my fists under the table. Your wife has been financially dependent on you for the duration of your marriage. She has no current employment and limited financial resources. It would be unjust to leave her without any means of support while she reestablishes herself. I almost laughed. Reestablishes herself? She was already reestablished in another man's bed. But the judge wasn't done. Given the length of the marriage and the financial disparity, I am granting her monthly spousal support. Mr. Daniels, you are ordered to pay alimony in the amount of... I barely heard the rest. I just sat there, stunned. Meanwhile, my ex-wife slowly turned to look at me, and she smirked. I'll never forget that look on her face. The way she crossed her legs, her manicured fingers tapping the table like this, was all just a minor inconvenience to her. When the ruling was finalized, we walked out of the courtroom in complete silence. I was still trying to process everything when she let out a dramatic sigh and stretched. That was exhausting. I ignored her. She wasn't done. For you, I mean, not for me. I clenched my jaw, refusing to take the bait. She pulled out her phone and, right in front of me, called her new boyfriend. Hey babe, it's done. The divorce went through. Yeah, I'm getting alimony. She giggled and glanced at me. Told you he wouldn't fight back. That was it. That was the moment I decided. She thought this was over. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she had won. She thought I would walk away defeated, broken, forced to finance her new life while she played house with her affair partner. She thought I'd be humiliated, paying monthly for the privilege of being cheated on. She thought she'd ride off into the sunset while I rotted in bitterness. She was wrong, because what she failed to understand was that revenge isn't about reacting in anger. It's about patience, it's about strategy, and I had a plan that would make her regret every single decision she made. I didn't blow up. I didn't scream at her when she smirked her way out of court, flashing her victory smile like she had just won the lottery. I didn't react when she sent casual texts reminding me that my first alimony payment was due soon. No hard feelings, right? Just the way things worked out. Hope we can be civil. Civil? I clenched my jaw so tightly I thought my teeth would crack. But I didn't reply. Because anger is predictable. And predictable men don't win wars. I needed her to think I was broken. And so I paid the first alimony check on time without complaint. And I waited. My ex-wife was more than just religious. She was devout. She wasn't just a member of her church, she was a leader. She preached about loyalty and marriage values. She hosted women's retreats about building a strong Christian household. She had convinced everyone that she was a woman of pure morality. And that was her weakness. Because while the law might not punish her for being a cheating, manipulative, gold-digging liar, her church would. I didn't make a scene. No, I did something far worse. One Sunday morning, I dropped off a sealed envelope at her church's front office, addressed to the pastor and church elders. Inside, a certified copy of the DNA test proving I wasn't the father. Screenshots of her texts admitting to the affair. Proof that she was already cohabiting with another man while demanding alimony from me. A letter written politely and respectfully stating, as a member of this congregation, I felt it was my duty to bring the truth to light. I trust the church will handle this in accordance with its values. No drama, no confrontation, just cold, hard facts. Then, I walked away and waited. Step 4. Watching her life implode. I didn't have to wait long. The next Sunday, my phone started blowing up. First a text from an old church friend. Dude, what did you do? The whole church knows. It's bad. Then another. She just got pulled into the pastor's office. She's screaming at the elders. And then, she called me. I let it ring. Then she called again and again and again. By the 7th missed call, I finally picked up. And oh, was she furious. The second I answered, she exploded. You sick freak, you did this to me. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. I have no idea what you're talking about. You sent them the DNA test, they know everything. My life is ruined. Her voice cracked. She was on the verge of hysteria. They called me an adulteress, Will. They took away my church leadership. I can't even show my face at Sunday service anymore. Her perfect little religious reputation? Gone. Her good Christian woman act? Shattered. She was a pariah in the one place that mattered most to her. And it only got worse. I thought her life was already falling apart. I was wrong. Because a few days later, I got another text from a mutual friend. Dude, her new man dumped her. I blinked at my phone. Seriously, that fast? Apparently, once the truth came out and she became a social outcast, her soulmate had a sudden change of heart. He blocked her number, stopped answering texts, deleted her from social media, moved on like she never existed. She had burned every bridge for this man. And now, she had nothing. She lasted 2 weeks before she caved. Late one night, I got a text from her. I miss you. Can we talk? I ignored it. A few days later, I was stupid. I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I ignored that too. And then, a phone call. I answered, just to hear her pathetic, shaken voice. Will, I don't have anywhere to go. I lost my friends, my church, my baby's father left me. I cut her off. Not my problem. She choked out a sob. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I smirked. Cool. Good luck with your new life. Then I hung up and blocked her. Now you might be wondering, but Will, you still have to pay her alimony. Doesn't that mean she wins? Not even close. I'm rich. Alimony's a joke to me, and I just watched her entire life crumble while mine got better. So no, I didn't lose. She lost everything. And that was worth every penny. A lot of people think public shame isn't as powerful as losing money or status. They're wrong, because when someone builds their entire identity on how people see them, on being loved, respected, admired, taking that away is worse than any financial ruin. And my ex-wife? She wasn't just a casual churchgoer. Her reputation in the church was her life. And now, she was officially a fallen woman. The church elders, the same men who once praised her for being a devoted wife and a pillar of the community, held an emergency meeting about her moral failings. They didn't just scold her. They destroyed her. And the worst part? The whispers. Because while the church had an official punishment, the social punishment was even more brutal. The first Sunday after the scandal broke, she showed up to church like nothing happened. Big mistake. People refused to sit next to her. Conversations stopped when she walked by. No one greeted her. Her best friends, the ones she used to gossip with, laugh with, host brunches with, they turned their backs on her. She was officially a pariah. And if that wasn't bad enough, her parents were humiliated. Her family was deeply religious. Her father was a respected elder in the church, and her mother was a women's ministry leader. Now, her father refused to even look at her during service. Her mother wouldn't return her calls. Her younger siblings were ashamed to be seen with her. Her entire family name was tarnished, and she had no one to blame but herself. If she thought she could turn to her new man for comfort, she was in for a rude awakening. The moment her reputation tanked, he ghosted her. She tried to reach out, he ignored her texts. She showed up at his place, he refused to answer the door. Eventually, she sent a mutual friend to ask why he was avoiding her. His response? "I didn't sign up for all this drama. She's on her own." Just like that, he was gone. The man she threw our marriage away for? He dropped her the moment things got inconvenient. Because she wasn't just involved in church, she worked at a private Christian school. And guess what? Word got out. Parents complained. Administration held a meeting, and 2 weeks later, she was let go. Officially, they cited budget cuts. But we both knew the truth. No one wanted a known adulteress teaching their children about faith. My ex-wife had a full-blown breakdown after service. Someone had whispered, "adulteress," as she walked past, and she snapped, started screaming at people in the church parking lot, told them they were all hypocrites, started crying, then stormed off in her car. The next week she called me. For the first time in months, her voice didn't have that smug tone. She sounded hollow. "Will, I don't have anywhere to go." I said nothing. "My parents barely speak to me. My church has abandoned me. I lost my job, and..." She sniffled, then whispered, "He left me too." There it was, the realization that she had gambled everything and lost, the final consequence of her own choices. I stayed silent. Then she broke down completely, sharing all the things that happened to her that I just mentioned. "I was stupid. I should have never done this to you." I finally cut her off. "I don't care." Silence. Then a quiet, broken whisper. "Are you happy now?" I took a deep breath, and then I smiled. "Yes." Then I hung up and blocked her. A lot of people asked me, "But you still have to pay alimony. Doesn't that mean she wins?" Not even close. I'm rich. The alimony barely dents my finances. She's completely alone. She's a social outcast. She has no family, no church, no job, and no future. She thought she won, but in the end, she lost everything. At our anniversary dinner, I stepped away to pay the bill. On my way back, I heard her aunt say, "Does he still think you love him?" My wife smirked and said, "Of course, his credit's great and he pays for everything. Why would I leave?" I sat down, finished my drink, and drove us home in silence. 2 days later, she tried to swipe my card, and nothing worked. Her aunt called me crying. "Before we start, I just want to say thank you for being here. It means the world. But take a look at this. Only 8% of people watching are subscribed. If you enjoy these stories and want to support more of them, just one click makes a huge difference." You ever have one of those moments where everything suddenly clicks? Like all these random puzzle pieces you've been staring at for years suddenly form a clear picture? That was me last week at Castello's, an overpriced Italian place my wife Sarah insisted on for our 5th anniversary. Let me back up. I'm 34, run my own construction company that's finally taking off after years of 80-hour weeks and financial stress. Sarah's 32, comes from money but doesn't work, hasn't held a job since we got married. When we met, I was still struggling, living in a studio apartment and driving a truck that was more rust than metal. Sarah was different then, or seemed it. She was working as a gallery assistant, had her own apartment, subsidized by her parents, and talked about becoming an art curator someday. I fell hard. She was beautiful, cultured, seemed to see potential in me that others missed. When she moved in with me 6 months later, her parents nearly had a collective stroke. Her dad actually asked if I could provide documentation of my income and credit score. Should have been a red flag, but I was so determined to prove myself worthy of her that I handed it all over without question. We got married a year later, small ceremony, because I was putting every spare dollar into growing my business. Sarah wasn't thrilled about that, but said she understood it was an investment in our future. After the wedding, things shifted. First, she quit her gallery job, said she wanted to focus on supporting my business aspirations. Sounds nice, except her version of support was mainly social networking with potential clients at country clubs her family belonged to. Then came the gradual lifestyle upgrades. Babe, we need to move to a better neighborhood if you want to be taken seriously. These clients won't respect you in that suit. You need something tailored. We should join the Lake Club. That's where all the real deals happen. Each suggestion came with the same implied message. To succeed, I needed to spend more. And since my business was actually growing, I rationalized the expenses. Maybe she was right. Maybe the $200 client dinners and the lakefront rental were helping my image. The lines between business expenses and keeping my wife happy blurred completely. There were moments that nagged at me, like how Sarah's interest in my day directly correlated with whether I'd closed a big deal, or how she'd disappear for girls' trips when cash was tight but would become the doting wife when a project paid out, or how her aunt, Lisa, a sharp-tongued woman who'd married and divorced 3 wealthy men, always referred to me as Sarah's builder instead of my name. Still, I wasn't completely naive. About 2 years ago, I started keeping certain financial moves to myself. The business was doing well enough that I could divert some profits into separate investments without affecting our lifestyle. I told myself it was just smart planning, diversification, or whatever. Deep down, I was building a safety net. Back to Costello's. Our anniversary dinner was Sarah's pick, of course. I'd suggested something more meaningful, the pizza place where we had our first date. She shot that down immediately. God, Jake, we can't celebrate at some dive. What would people think? I didn't bother asking which people would be monitoring our anniversary dinner. The evening was pleasant enough. Sarah was in a good mood because I'd landed a contract for 6 luxury townhouses the week before. When the check came, I excused myself to pay at the front desk, a habit I've had ever since my card was skimmed at a restaurant years ago. On my way back, I had to pass behind a decorative partition where Sarah was sitting with Lisa, who'd coincidentally been dining with friends at the restaurant and stopped by our table earlier. I paused when I heard my name. Does Jake still think you love him? Lisa's voice slightly slurred from whatever she'd been drinking. There was a pause and then Sarah's response, clear as day with a distinct smirk in her voice. Of course, his credit's great and he pays for everything. Why would I leave? They both laughed. Lisa said something else I couldn't quite catch and Sarah replied, well, Mom and Dad were right about one thing. Marrying a tradesman means he'll always be working too hard to notice what I'm doing. I stood there, completely still. It wasn't even shock I felt, more like confirmation. Like finally getting a diagnosis for symptoms you've been ignoring. I walked back to the table, sat down and finished my drink while they wrapped up their conversation. Sarah rejoined me, completely oblivious to what I'd overheard. I drove us home in silence. You're quiet, she said as we pulled into our driveway. Just tired, I replied. Big project starting tomorrow. She nodded, instantly losing interest once she knew it wasn't about her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made a plan. The next morning, I called my bank and credit card companies before Sarah woke up. I explained I needed to remove my wife as an authorized user due to suspected fraudulent activity. By noon, I'd contacted my lawyer, my accountant, and my business partner. By evening, I'd moved half our joint savings to my separate account and frozen the rest. Sarah didn't notice anything amiss that first day. She was busy with her usual routine, Pilates, lunch with friends, shopping. I went to work like normal. Kissed her goodbye, told her I loved her. It felt strange how easy it was to pretend. 2 days later, Sarah tried to pay for a spa day with her friends using my American Express. The card was declined. She tried another card. Same result. She called me, voice tight with controlled anger. There's something wrong with the cards. That's strange, I said, sounding appropriately concerned. I paid all the bills last week. What are you trying to buy? Just lunch, she lied. I was staring at the real-time notification from the spa for $900. Can you call the bank? I'm in meetings all day, but I'll check tonight, I promised. Use your own card for now. Silence on her end. We both knew she kept her personal credit card for emergencies only. It had a low limit because she had no income to support it. Fine, she finally said and hung up. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with texts from Sarah demanding to know what was going on. She'd tried to access our joint checking account and discovered it was frozen. I didn't respond. I was legitimately in a meeting with clients. When I got out, I had 27 missed calls and a voicemail from my lawyer confirming he'd filed the preliminary divorce paperwork. I drove home, half expecting Sarah to be there waiting with fury and accusations. The house was empty. According to our doorbell camera, she'd left with 3 suitcases 2 hours earlier. Later, I learned she'd gone straight to her parents' house. The next morning, Lisa called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Jake?" Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "What have you done?" "What did Sarah tell you?" I countered. "That you've lost your mind, frozen all the accounts, cut off her cards, some kind of male midlife crisis." Lisa's voice had the practiced outrage of someone accustomed to taking her niece's side. "Interesting interpretation," I said. "Did she happen to mention our anniversary dinner, your little chat at the table?" Silence, then a small shaky inhale. "You heard?" "Every word." "Jake, we were just talking. Women say things sometimes. It doesn't mean—" "Save it, Lisa. I've already filed for divorce. Sarah can contact my lawyer if she needs anything." "You're making a terrible mistake," she said, but the conviction had drained from her voice. "Sarah loves you. She's just complicated." "No, she's actually very simple once you understand her motivations. Tell her I said thanks for the clarity." I hung up. Then I blocked both their numbers. Over the next week, the situation escalated exactly as I'd expected. Sarah's father called my business partner, threatening to ruin us if I didn't fix this nonsense immediately. I received a letter from a divorce attorney known for being particularly aggressive with wealthy clients, demanding immediate restoration of Mrs. Harrison's standard of living. Sarah even sent a mutual friend to my office, hoping to appeal to my emotions. What none of them knew was how prepared I was for this moment. When my lawyer counterfinancialed with evidence of Sarah's spending patterns, documentation of her contributions, or lack thereof, to our household and my business, and records of large transfers to her personal account that she'd hidden from me, the tone changed dramatically. Her attorney requested a meeting. In a conference room downtown, I finally saw Sarah again. She looked immaculate as always, but her eyes had a calculating hardness I now recognized all too well. "This is unnecessary," she said, barely looking at me. "We can fix this without lawyers." "I prefer having witnesses to our conversations moving forward," I replied. Her attorney cleared his throat. "My client is willing to consider a fair settlement that acknowledges her contributions to your success." My lawyer, Patricia, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen it all, slid a document across the table. "My client has already outlined what he considers fair. Given the short duration of the marriage and documented evidence of financial impropriety, we believe this is more than generous." Sarah snatched up the paper. As she read, her face went from confident to confused to outraged. The settlement offered her the cars in her name, the contents of her personal accounts, and a one-time payment that was a fraction of what she clearly expected. "This is insulting," she hissed. 5 years of my life, and you offer me less than I had before we met?" That's when I finally spoke directly to her. "Before we met, you at least had a job and the respect of working for something. Consider this an opportunity to find that person again." "Your business would be nothing without my connections," she snapped. "Actually, I've analyzed our client acquisition data," I said calmly. "Less than 8% came through your network, and those clients had the lowest retention rate. But thanks for your concern about my business." Her lawyer whispered something to her. She shook her head vehemently. "We'll need time to consider this offer," he said diplomatically. "Of course," Patricia replied, "but I should mention that my client has extensive documentation regarding Mrs. Harrison's spending habits, including some interesting purchases during weekends she claimed to be with family." Sarah's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" I hadn't told my lawyer everything, but she was smart enough to recognize the patterns in Sarah's credit card statements. Weekend charges in locations that matched social media posts from a certain male friend of hers. "It means," I said, gathering my things, "that fighting this will be more expensive and embarrassing than accepting it. Your call." As we left, Sarah called after me. "You wouldn't even have met the Brightons without me, or the Winstons. You think you did this all yourself?" I turned back. "You know what's funny? I always gave you credit for believing in me from the beginning. Now I realize you just saw me as a stock to invest in. Your mistake was selling too early. 3 weeks later, Sarah signed the settlement agreement. She got less than 15% of our assets, which was still enough for her to live comfortably if she was careful. I kept the house, the business, and most importantly, my peace of mind. Lisa texted me from a new number the day after the settlement was finalized. You were smarter than the others. She miscalculated. I didn't need to ask what she meant by the others. Instead, I simply replied, no. Her biggest mistake was thinking money was all I cared about. It's been 2 months now. The business is thriving. Turns out clients prefer working directly with me rather than through Sarah's networking. I've heard through mutual friends that she's living in her parents' guest house, telling anyone who'll listen that I had a breakdown and ruined a perfect marriage. Maybe in her mind, it was perfect. She got the lifestyle she wanted, and all it cost was pretending to love someone. But here's what Sarah never understood. I didn't build a successful business by being naive or sentimental. I built it by paying attention to details, by recognizing patterns, and by knowing when to cut my losses. I applied those same principles to our marriage. I just wish I'd done it sooner. Last week, I donated all of Sarah's remaining things to a women's shelter. As I was dropping off the last box, one of the volunteer coordinators asked if I'd consider being on their fundraising committee. They needed help planning a renovation for their facilities. We're getting coffee next week to discuss it. No fancy restaurant, just 2 people talking about something that matters. And for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to a conversation that has nothing to do with status, money, or keeping up appearances. Turns out, clarity is the most expensive thing I've ever paid for, and worth every penny. My fiancée got drunk at her sister's wedding and announced I'm only marrying him because my ex won't commit. 200 guests heard. I stood up. Let me fix that for you. Then I called off our wedding into the microphone. When she begged me the next morning, this went down last weekend and I'm still dealing with the fallout, but figured it was time to share the whole disaster. Fair warning, this is going to be long because there's a lot of background that explains why everything exploded the way it did. My ex-fiancée Rachel and I had been together for 4 years. We got engaged 8 months ago, after what I thought was a solid relationship. I'm 31 and work in commercial real estate. Good money, decent hours, and I've got my life together. Rachel is 28 and works as a marketing coordinator for some tech startup. Makes okay money, but nothing spectacular. The thing about Rachel is, she always had this weird relationship with her past. Specifically with her ex-boyfriend Tyler, who she dated all through college and for 2 years after. They broke up about 6 months before she and I met. According to her, he was immature and couldn't commit to anything serious. Didn't want to move in together, wasn't ready for marriage, all the usual stuff. But here's what bothered me from early on. She brought him up constantly. Tyler did this. Tyler said that. Tyler would have handled it differently. When we'd watch movies, she'd comment on what Tyler thought about them. When we'd go to restaurants, she'd mention how Tyler never liked that type of food. It was like having a third person in our relationship. I addressed it a few times in the first year. Told her it was weird how often his name came up. She'd get defensive and say I was being insecure, that they were just friends now, and she couldn't help having memories, that I needed to trust her and stop being jealous of someone from her past. So I backed off because I didn't want to be that controlling boyfriend. But the Tyler references never stopped. If anything, they got more frequent as we got more serious. When we moved in together after 18 months, she wanted to keep a bunch of photos from college that had Tyler in them. Group shots from parties, pictures from spring break trips, even some couple photos mixed in with family stuff. I said I wasn't comfortable having pictures of her ex-boyfriend all over our apartment. She said I was being ridiculous and they were just memories. We compromised. She could keep them, but they'd go in a box in the closet instead of being displayed. Except somehow they kept appearing around the apartment. On her nightstand, mixed in with work photos on her desk. Stuck to the refrigerator with other random pictures. Every time I'd point it out, she'd act like she forgot they were there. Oh, I was just looking through old stuff and left that out. I didn't realize that was visible behind those other photos. It became this constant passive-aggressive thing where she'd push boundaries, then play innocent, when I noticed. The worst part was social media. She was still friends with Tyler on everything. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, the works. She'd like his posts, comment on his photos, and he'd do the same for hers. Sometimes they'd have these long comment threads that looked more like private conversations happening in public. I asked her about it and got the same response. They were just friends. I was being paranoid. She couldn't help it if he happened to be active on social media. But then I started paying attention to what she was liking and commenting on. Tyler at the gym, Tyler with his new car, Tyler on vacation, Tyler with his friends. She was more engaged with his social media presence than she was with most of her actual friends. The really weird part was how she talked about his dating life. She always knew who he was seeing, how long they'd been together, why they'd broken up. She had more details about his relationships than I had about my own friends' dating situations. When I asked how she knew so much, she'd say they still talked occasionally, just catching up as friends. But the level of detail suggested they were talking more than occasionally. I later found out from mutual friends that Rachel had stayed in touch with Tyler's sister and several of his college buddies who would fill her in on his life. About 6 months before we got engaged, Tyler got into a serious relationship with some woman named Jen. Rachel was weird about it, moody and distracted. She'd check his social media obsessively, then get irritated when his posts were about Jen. That's when she started pushing hard for us to get engaged. We'd talked about marriage before, but suddenly it became urgent. When were we going to take the next step? What were we waiting for? All her friends were getting engaged. She wanted to start planning a future together. The timing felt off to me, like she was trying to prove something or compete with someone, but she was convincing about wanting to commit to our relationship. Said she'd been thinking about what really mattered and realized she wanted to build something permanent with me. So I proposed. Got her a nice ring. Nothing crazy expensive, but decent quality. She seemed happy and started planning immediately. Venue, dress, flowers, the whole production. But even during wedding planning, Tyler kept coming up. She'd mentioned how he'd always said he wanted a beach wedding, or how Tyler thought big weddings were wasteful, or how Tyler's sister had the most beautiful ceremony last year. I started wondering if she was marrying me or marrying the idea of marriage to make Tyler jealous. But every time I tried to bring it up, she'd turn it around on me. Why was I so obsessed with her ex? Why couldn't I just focus on our relationship instead of looking for problems? The worst incident happened about 3 months before our wedding. We were out with friends and Tyler showed up at the same bar. Just a coincidence, supposedly. But Rachel's whole demeanor changed. She got flirty and animated in a way I rarely saw with me. They talked for maybe 20 minutes while I stood there feeling like a third wheel. She was laughing at everything he said, touching his arm when she talked, acting like they were the only two people in the room. When we got home, I told her I wasn't comfortable with how she'd acted. She said I was overreacting and reading too much into normal friendly behavior, that I needed to get over my insecurity about Tyler because it was affecting our relationship. But I wasn't imagining things. She'd lit up around him in a way that made it clear she still had feelings. Strong feelings. 2 weeks before our wedding, Tyler and Jen broke up. Rachel found out somehow and was in this weird, good mood for days. She denied it had anything to do with Tyler, but the timing was obvious. That's when she started getting cold feet about our wedding. Suddenly, she was stressed about money, worried we were rushing into things, questioning whether we were really compatible long term. I asked if she wanted to postpone, and she said no. She wanted to go through with it. But her heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. She was going through the motions while mentally being somewhere else. Then came her sister's wedding, the weekend before ours was supposed to happen. Madison was getting married to her boyfriend of 3 years in this big church ceremony, followed by a reception at some fancy country club. Rachel was maid of honor, so she'd been involved in planning for months. I should mention that Madison and Rachel have always been competitive. Madison is 2 years older and has always been the golden child. Better grades, better job, better boyfriend according to their parents. Rachel has spent most of her life trying to keep up or prove she was just as successful. So when Madison got engaged, 6 months after we did, but planned her wedding for before ours, Rachel was annoyed. Said Madison was trying to steal her thunder. That it was typical Madison behavior to make everything about herself. The morning of Madison's wedding, Rachel was stressed and drinking early. Mimosas during hair and makeup. Wine while getting dressed. More wine during photos. By the time we got to the church, she was already tipsy. During the ceremony, she was emotional in a weird way. Not happy tears for her sister. More like sad, nostalgic crying that didn't match the moment. She kept checking her phone even though phones were supposed to be off. At the reception, she kept drinking. Champagne during cocktails, wine with dinner. More champagne during toasts. I tried to slow her down, but she brushed me off. Said it was her sister's wedding and she wanted to celebrate. The reception was at this country club with a big ballroom and an outdoor terrace, maybe 200 people total. Both families plus friends from high school and college. A lot of people I'd met but didn't know well. Everything was going fine until the dancing started. That's when Rachel really started getting sloppy. She was loud and stumbling and getting emotional about random things. I suggested we call an Uber and head home, but she wanted to stay. About an hour into the dancing, the DJ called for the traditional bouquet toss. All the single women gathered on the dance floor, while Madison stood on the little stage with her bouquet. Rachel wasn't single, obviously, but she pushed her way into the group anyway. She didn't catch the bouquet, but she was right in the thick of things. When it was over, the DJ started making announcements about upcoming weddings. He'd obviously been given a list because he mentioned Rachel and me along with 2 other couples. That's when things went sideways. The DJ handed the microphone to Madison to say something about her new marriage and thank everyone for coming. Madison gave a sweet speech about love and commitment and finding your person. Then she passed the microphone to their dad for the traditional father toast. But somehow Rachel intercepted it. She literally grabbed the microphone out of Madison's hand and stepped up to the center of the dance floor. 200 people turned to look at her. I knew immediately this was going to be bad. She was drunk and emotional, and had that look she got when she was about to say something she'd regret later. I started moving toward her, but I was on the other side of the room. Then Rachel really lost it. I think the combination of alcohol, seeing her sister get married first, and knowing Tyler was single again, just broke whatever filter she had left. She started talking about her own engagement. How she'd been trying to convince herself she was making the right choice. How she'd been comparing every man she dated to someone from her past. How she knew deep down she was still in love with someone else, but he wouldn't commit. The room was getting quiet. People were realizing this wasn't a normal wedding toast. I was pushing through the crowd trying to get to her, but she was in her own world now. Like all the feelings she'd been bottling up for 4 years were pouring out at once. That's when she said the words that ended our relationship. I mean, honestly, I'm only marrying him because my ex won't commit. Tyler is the love of my life, but he doesn't want to get married, so I settled for someone who does. The silence was deafening. 200 people staring at her. Staring at me. You could hear a pin drop in that ballroom. Madison looked mortified. Their parents looked shocked. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, but I wasn't going to stand there and be humiliated in front of everyone we knew. I walked up to the front, took the microphone from Rachel, and looked out at all those faces staring at me. "Well," I said, "let me fix that for you." I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app where I kept our wedding vendor information. In a clear voice that carried through the sound system, I started reading. "Our wedding, scheduled for 2 weeks from today, is officially canceled. Pine Valley Country Club, your services will not be needed. Morrison Catering, your services will not be needed. Classic Sounds DJ service will not be needed." I went through the entire list of vendors we'd booked. Florist, photographer, musicians, transportation, even the officiant. Each announcement was met with gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Rachel was standing there looking horrified. She'd sobered up real quick when she realized what was happening. She kept trying to grab the microphone back, but I moved away from her. After I finished reading the vendor list, I looked back out at the crowd. Just to clarify for everyone here tonight, our wedding is officially canceled. Rachel is free to pursue her true love, Tyler, without being burdened by settling for someone like me. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the evening, celebrating Madison and James. I handed the microphone back to Madison, gave her a quick hug, and walked out of the reception. The ride home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts, but I ignored all of them. I just wanted to get home and process what had just happened. When I got to our apartment, I packed a bag and went to my buddy Mike's place. I wasn't ready to deal with Rachel when she got home. I needed space to think about what came next. She started calling around midnight, then texting, then calling again. I let it all go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say could wait until I was ready to hear it. The next morning, I had 37 missed calls and about 50 text messages. From Rachel, from Madison, from their parents, from mutual friends who'd been at the wedding. Everyone wanted to know what was happening and whether the wedding was really canceled. I listened to Rachel's voicemails first. The progression was interesting. Started with drunk rambling about how she didn't mean what she said, how it was just the alcohol talking, how she loved me and wanted to marry me. By morning, the messages were more panicked, begging me to call her back, promising she could explain everything, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and we could fix this. The final message was her crying and apologizing and pleading with me to come home so we could talk. I texted her back around noon, said I'd be by later to get my stuff and we could talk then if she wanted. But I wasn't interested in explanations or apologies. She'd made her feelings clear in front of 200 people. When I got to the apartment, she was waiting with this whole speech prepared. She'd been drinking and made a mistake. She didn't really mean what she said. She was just emotional about her sister's wedding and stressed about our own wedding planning. But then she tried to minimize what had actually happened. Said it wasn't that bad, that people would forget about it, that we could still have our wedding and this would all blow over. That's when I knew for sure I was making the right decision. I told her I didn't care if she was drunk. Alcohol doesn't make you say things that aren't true. It just makes you say true things you normally wouldn't say. She'd been in love with Tyler our entire relationship. She'd been settling for me because I was willing to marry her, and he wasn't. She'd essentially admitted to 200 people that our whole engagement was a lie. She tried to argue that she chose me over Tyler, that actions mattered more than feelings, that she was committed to our relationship even if she had lingering feelings for someone else. But I wasn't interested in being someone's second choice. I wasn't going to marry someone who was still in love with their ex, and I definitely wasn't going to pretend that what happened at the wedding was no big deal. I packed my stuff while she followed me around the apartment crying and begging me to reconsider. She promised she'd cut contact with Tyler completely, delete him from social media, do whatever it took to prove she was committed to our relationship. But it was too late for promises. She'd had 4 years to get over Tyler and clearly hadn't. If anything, she'd gotten more attached to him over time. Our engagement had just been her way of trying to make him jealous or prove she could move on. I left the ring on the kitchen counter and told her I'd be back for the rest of my stuff later. She could keep the apartment since her name was on the lease too. I just wanted out. The aftermath has been exactly what you'd expect. Her family is furious with me for humiliating Rachel in public. They think I should have handled it privately instead of making a scene at Madison's wedding. Rachel's mom called me a week later trying to do damage control, said Rachel was devastated and had made a horrible mistake, that she really did love me and was just confused, that I should give her another chance to prove herself. I told her I appreciated the call, but the decision was final. Rachel had shown me who she really was, and I believed her. Madison actually reached out to apologize for what happened at her wedding. She said she felt terrible that her reception had turned into drama for Rachel and me. I told her it wasn't her fault, and I was sorry Rachel had hijacked her special day. Most of our mutual friends have been supportive. They all saw what happened and understood why I reacted the way I did. A few think I could have handled it more privately, but none of them think I should take Rachel back. The Tyler situation is interesting. Apparently, Rachel reached out to him after our breakup, thinking maybe now they could finally be together. But he wasn't interested. Told her he valued their friendship, but didn't want to date her again. So now she's single and realizes she burned everything down for someone who didn't want her anyway. I'd feel bad for her if she hadn't spent 4 years emotionally cheating on me with her ex. I heard through friends that she's been trying to date but having a hard time. Word gets around in our social circle, and apparently guys aren't interested in someone who's that obviously not over her ex. She's also had to deal with the social embarrassment of everyone knowing what happened. It was a big wedding with people from high school and college. The story spread pretty quickly through our extended friend group. I've been doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I moved into a downtown loft and I'm enjoying being single again. Dating when I feel like it, but not rushing into anything serious. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored. The constant Tyler references, the photos she insisted on keeping, the social media stalking, the way she lit up around him but was lukewarm with me. I convinced myself it was normal to have feelings about an ex, that it would fade over time as our relationship got stronger. But if anything, it got worse. She became more obsessed with him, not less. The engagement was probably her last attempt to get his attention, make him realize what he was losing. When that didn't work, she decided to go through with marrying me anyway, because it was better than being alone. But I'm not a consolation prize. I'm not going to marry someone who's settling for me because their first choice isn't available. And I'm definitely not going to pretend that level of disrespect is acceptable because she was drunk. The wedding cancellation was the right call. Humiliating, yes, but necessary. She humiliated me first by announcing to 200 people that she was only marrying me as a backup plan. I just made sure there were consequences for that level of disrespect. Some people think I went too far by canceling everything so publicly, that I should have waited and handled it privately later. But I wasn't going to slink away and let her spin the narrative. She created the public humiliation, so I responded publicly. Plus, all those vendors needed to know as soon as possible. Wedding vendors book months in advance. The sooner I canceled, the better chance they had of rebooking those dates with other clients. Rachel tried to contact me a few more times over the next month, wanting to talk about getting back together, wanting closure, wanting to explain herself better. I responded once to tell her I wasn't interested in any further communication and to please stop contacting me. She finally got the message and left me alone. Since we'd been splitting the rent on our shared apartment, I gave her 60 days notice that I was moving out so she could find a roommate or a cheaper place. Turns out she couldn't afford it on her salary alone and ended up moving back in with her parents before finding something smaller. The whole thing was a blessing in disguise, really. Better to find out who she really was before we got married and had kids and joint finances. Divorce would have been a lot messier than a broken engagement. I learned a lot about myself through this process. I learned I won't accept being someone's backup plan. I won't ignore red flags to avoid conflict, and I won't let someone disrespect me publicly without consequences. I also learned that sometimes the most dramatic response is the most honest response. I could have pulled Rachel aside quietly and talked to her privately, but that would have let her minimize what happened. Make excuses. Convince herself it wasn't that bad. By responding immediately and publicly, I made sure everyone understood exactly what had happened and why the engagement was over. No room for alternative narratives or damage control. Tyler contacted me about a month after everything went down. He wanted to apologize for the role he played in our relationship problems. Said he hadn't realized how Rachel felt about him and never encouraged her feelings. I told him I didn't blame him for Rachel's choices. He hadn't done anything wrong by being friendly with an ex-girlfriend. The problem was Rachel's inability to move on and my inability to see it clearly. He mentioned that Rachel had reached out to him after our breakup, but he'd made it clear he wasn't interested in anything romantic. Said he hoped she could find someone who appreciated her the way she deserved. I thought that was decent of him to reach out. Probably awkward for him too, since he was essentially the reason our relationship imploded. The funniest part of this whole mess is how it affected Madison's wedding. Apparently, people still talk about it at family gatherings. Not in a mean way, but like it's this legendary family drama that happened at Madison's reception. Madison says she doesn't mind because it makes for a good story. Plus, she got to be the mature sister who handled everything with grace while Rachel had a public meltdown. I'm dating someone new now. Sarah is a real estate attorney I met through work connections. She's smart and funny and refreshingly straightforward about what she wants. No games or hidden agendas or unresolved feelings about exes. When I told her about the Rachel situation, she said she was impressed I had the backbone to stand up for myself so decisively. Said too many people accept disrespect because they're afraid of being alone. That's probably true. I think part of me knew Rachel wasn't fully committed to our relationship, but I ignored it because breaking up seemed harder than working through it. The wedding announcement forced me to confront what I'd been avoiding. Rachel did me a favor, really. She showed everyone, including herself, who she really was and what she really wanted. She just didn't expect me to have enough self-respect to walk away from someone who was settling for me. The timing was brutal financially. 2 weeks before our wedding meant we lost most of our deposits and payments. Venues, caterers, photographers don't give refunds that close to the date. We were out probably $15,000 between the two of us. But honestly, it was worth every penny to end things cleanly, rather than go through with a marriage I knew was doomed. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if she hadn't gotten drunk and made that announcement. Would I have gone through with the wedding, knowing what I knew? Would I have spent years married to someone who was in love with someone else? Probably not. The red flags were too obvious to ignore forever. But it might have taken longer for me to build up the courage to leave. The public humiliation gave me the clarity and motivation I needed to end things decisively. Looking back, the whole relationship feels like a waste of 4 years. But I learned important lessons about self-respect and boundary setting that will serve me well going forward. I know now not to ignore obvious red flags because I want a relationship to work. I know not to accept being someone's backup plan. And I know that sometimes the most dramatic response is also the most appropriate response. Rachel got exactly what she deserved. She spent 4 years emotionally cheating on me with her ex, then publicly announced she was settling for me. The natural consequence of that level of disrespect was losing the relationship she was taking for granted. She could have had a good life with me if she'd actually committed to our relationship instead of using it as a way to make Tyler jealous. But she made her choice, and now she gets to live with it. Before our wedding rehearsal, she said, "Don't wait up tonight. I'm going out with my ex. It's just for closure." I didn't argue. But the next morning, when she walked down the aisle, it wasn't me waiting for her. I'm the kind of guy who believes in clear lines. You're either in or you're out. You're either with me or you're not. For 3 years, I thought Emily was with me. We built a good life. I run a small engineering firm, and the work is demanding, but it's stable. It allowed us to have a nice house and to plan the kind of wedding she said she always dreamed of. I'm a planner. I like details, I like logistics, and I like knowing where I stand. Emily was always more of a go-with-the-flow type. I thought it was a good balance. I was the anchor and she was the sail. Her ex-boyfriend, a guy named Greg, was always a footnote in our story that she refused to erase. They had dated for years before me, and according to her it ended badly, but she was totally over it. Still, his name would pop up now and then. A text on her birthday. An accidental like on an old photo. I never liked it, but I trusted her. I believed that our future was more important than her past. That trust evaporated 24 hours ago. It was Friday night, the night of our wedding rehearsal. We were standing in the church where we were supposed to get married the next day. Our families were there, the wedding party was there, and everything was going smoothly. We ran through the ceremony, we practiced the vows, and we all went to the rehearsal dinner. Everything felt normal. After the dinner, as we were saying goodbye to our parents, Emily pulled me aside. She was already dressed to go out, not to go home. "Hey," she said, her tone a little too casual. "Don't wait up for me tonight." I was confused. "What do you mean? We have to be up at the crack of dawn. The wedding is tomorrow." She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just fiddled with the strap on her purse. "I know, it's just, Greg is in town," he called. "He wants to meet up for a drink just for closure. Had to officially close that chapter before I start a new one with you." I just stared at her. The night before our wedding, she wanted to go meet her ex-boyfriend for closure. The sheer, breathtaking disrespect of it was stunning. The audacity. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. She was telling me what she was doing, not asking for my permission. My best man, my brother, was standing a few feet away and overheard. The look on his face was a mirror of the shock I felt. But I didn't explode. I didn't yell. In that moment, as she stood there waiting for me to make a scene, a strange and total calm descended over me. The emotional part of my brain just went silent, and the logistical, problem-solving part took over. This wasn't a relationship issue to be worked through. This was a catastrophic systems failure, and I was the engineer who had to deal with it. I looked at her, and I gave her a small, tight smile. "Okay," I said, my voice even. "I understand. You do what you need to do." She looked surprised, then relieved. She was expecting a fight. When she didn't get one, she thought she'd gotten away with it. "Really? Oh, thank you for being so understanding," she said, giving me a quick, dismissive kiss on the cheek. "I won't be late." She walked off, got into a rideshare, and was gone. My brother came over, his eyes wide. "Are you seriously okay with that?" "No," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm not, but I'm not going to argue about it. I'm going to fix it." He looked confused. "Fix it? The wedding is in 12 hours. "Exactly," I said, already scrolling through my contacts. "That's just enough time." She wanted closure. I was about to give it to her, the most permanent, public, and unforgettable closure she could ever imagine. Update 1. The moment Emily's car turned the corner, I went into mission mode. The next 12 hours would be a masterclass in logistical warfare. My brother, bless his heart, just stared at me, waiting for instructions like a soldier waiting for orders. "First things first," I said. "We need to know where she is, and we need to get in touch with the ex." Finding her was easy. She had the Find My Friends app active on her phone, a detail she had clearly forgotten. A few taps and I had her location, a dimly lit cocktail bar downtown called The Alibi. The irony was not lost on me. Finding Greg, the ex, was a bit trickier. I didn't have his number, but I knew his last name and where he worked. A quick search online brought up his professional profile. He was a sales guy, and his profile picture showed a man with a confident, slightly arrogant smile. The kind of guy who probably thought he was the hero of every story. This was a weakness I could exploit. I used a burner app to get a temporary phone number. I sent him a text. "Hey Greg, this is Sarah, one of Emily's bridesmaids. This is gonna sound crazy, but Em is having a full-blown meltdown. She's supposed to get married tomorrow, but she's in love with you. She's at the Alibi right now, but she's too scared to tell you the truth. She's terrified of her fiancé. He's a really controlling guy. She wants you to save her, but she'll never admit it. You need to be her hero." It was a gamble, but I was betting on his ego. A man like Greg wouldn't be able to resist the chance to be the white knight, to swoop in and save the woman who got away from her boring, controlling fiancé. While I waited for his response, I assembled my own team. I called my 3 groomsmen and my father. I told them exactly what had happened and what I was about to do. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a chorus of unanimous, furious support. My dad, a man of few words and decisive action, just said, "Tell me what you need, son." The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. The wedding was not being canceled, it was being repurposed. I sent a mass text to every single guest on my side of the family. "Urgent update. The wedding plans have changed. This is not a joke. The ceremony tomorrow is not for me and Emily. It is now a surprise celebration of Emily's closure. Please, trust me. Come to the church as planned. Do not, under any circumstances, contact Emily or her family. Just come, sit on the groom's side, and enjoy the show. More details to follow." Next, I dealt with the finances. I logged into my bank account, and put a stop payment on every check I had written for the wedding vendors. I then called the 24-hour fraud alert line for my credit card, the one on file with the venue and the caterer. I reported the card stolen. This would ensure that any attempt to charge it the next day would be declined. The contracts were in both our names, but the payment methods were all mine. I was surgically removing myself from the financial equation. My phone buzzed. It was Greg. Who is this really? Is this a joke? Emily is right here. I texted back from my burner number. Of course she's with you. She's putting on a brave face. Ask her if she's truly happy. Ask her if she wishes things were different. She'll deny it. But look in her eyes. She's trapped. Tomorrow morning, she's supposed to be at the Grand Cathedral at 11 a.m. If you're the man she thinks you are, you'll be there too. At the altar, waiting for her. I knew Emily. After a few drinks, she would be sentimental and emotional. She would say all the things Greg wanted to hear. She would feed his ego, and he would swallow it whole. The final piece of the puzzle was my own disappearance. While my groomsmen were fielding confused calls from my relatives and reassuring them that I was okay, I was at home, packing. I threw a suitcase together with my essentials. I then went into my home office and shredded every shared document we had. I packed up my personal computers and my work files. I left one thing on the kitchen counter. It was the wedding album from my parents' wedding. I opened it to a picture of them on their wedding day, looking at each other with so much love and respect. Underneath it, I left my engagement ring. I was out of the house by 3 a.m. I drove to my brother's place, left my car in his garage, and he drove me to the airport. I had used my airline miles to book a one-way ticket to Costa Rica, the destination of our now defunct honeymoon. As I sat in the airport lounge watching the sun begin to rise, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Greg. I'm in. I'll be there. I smiled, turned my phone off, and boarded the plane. The show was about to begin, and for the first time in a long time, I was just a member of the audience. Update 2. I landed in Costa Rica to the sweet, sweet bliss of a phone that had been turned off for 8 hours. I was sitting at a beachside bar, a cold beer in my hand, when I finally turned it back on. The digital explosion was immediate and glorious. It was a tidal wave of missed calls, voicemails, and texts. My brother had been feeding me updates from the ground via a messaging app. The scene at the church, he said, was something out of a movie. Emily's guests had arrived, all dressed up and excited. My side of the church was also full, but with a very different energy. My family and friends were sitting in quiet, buzzing anticipation. They knew something was about to happen. Greg, true to his word, had shown up. He was standing at the altar, looking nervous but determined, dressed in a slightly too tight suit he had probably bought that morning. The officiant, a man who was very confused, was trying to have a whispered conversation with him. And then the music started. The doors at the back of the church opened, and there was Emily in her white dress, looking radiant. She started her walk down the aisle, beaming at all of her friends and family. She was so focused on her grand entrance that she didn't look at the altar until she was about halfway down. According to my brother, the moment she saw Greg is a moment that will be studied by scientists for generations. Her face went through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, shock, horror, and finally, a dawning, sickening understanding. The music faltered and then stopped. A wave of whispers went through the church. Her father, standing beside her, looked from her to Greg, his face a mask of fury. Emily reportedly just stood there, frozen in the middle of the aisle. Greg, realizing that this was not the romantic rescue he had envisioned, just gave a weak, helpless shrug. And then, my father stood up. He had a microphone that my brother had arranged with the church's sound guy. His voice boomed through the silent cathedral. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice full of calm authority. "It seems there has been a change of plans. My son, the groom, was informed last night that his fiancée needed to get closure with her ex-boyfriend. He decided to be supportive. He understood that closure is important, so he arranged for her to have it, right here, right now. It appears this is the wedding she truly wanted. So on behalf of my son, I'd like to say congratulations to the happy couple." He sat down. The church was in chaos. Emily's family was screaming. Greg was trying to sneak out a side door. and Emily just burst into tears right there in the middle of the aisle. The aftermath was a financial and social nightmare for her. The venue, the caterer, the florist, they all tried to charge the credit card on file, which was of course declined. The contracts, which her father had co-signed, suddenly became his problem. He was on the hook for a six-figure wedding that had ended in a public implosion. My brother told me that Emily's father called him, screaming and threatening lawsuits. My brother just calmly replied, "Your daughter went out with her ex-boyfriend the night before her wedding." Liam didn't cancel anything. He just declined to participate. You should be thanking him. He saved your daughter from a lifetime of being married to a man she clearly doesn't respect. The story spread through our town like a virus. Emily, who had always cared so much about her image, was now the woman who was left at the altar by two different men on the same day. I spent the next 2 weeks in Costa Rica. I went surfing, I hiked in the rainforest, and I drank a lot of good coffee. I didn't answer a single one of the hundreds of messages from Emily or her family. My lawyer handled everything. He sent them a formal letter stating that our engagement was officially terminated due to her actions. He also sent her a bill for her half of all the shared wedding planning expenses that I had paid for out of my own pocket. When I finally came home, the dust had started to settle. My house was quiet. Her things were still there, a sad monument to a life that was now over. I hired a company to pack it all up and put it in storage. I sent her the key with no note. Final update, it's been 6 months since the wedding that wasn't. The silence in my life has been profound and wonderful. I focused on my work, reconnected with friends, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of a drama-free existence. The legal threats from Emily's family went nowhere. My lawyer easily shut down their claims. They had no legal ground to stand on. In the end, they were forced to pay off all the wedding vendors themselves to avoid being sued. The financial hit was, I'm told, catastrophic for her father's pride and his bank account. Emily's life, from what I've heard through the grapevine, is a mess. She and Greg are not together. He was furious at being used as a pawn in her drama and wants nothing to do with her. She had to move back in with her parents, and the atmosphere in that house is reportedly Arctic. She tried to launch a smear campaign against me online, but it was quickly shouted down by my friends and family, who were all too happy to share the real story of what happened. The most telling moment came about 2 months ago. I was at a hardware store, and I ran into one of her bridesmaids, the one named Sarah, who had texted me from the burner phone. She saw me and looked like she wanted to run and hide. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice friendly. She looked up, surprised. "Oh hey," she mumbled. "Look, about what happened, I'm so sorry. We all told her it was a terrible idea to go out with him, but she wouldn't listen. She said you were so predictable that you would just get mad and then get over it." I just nodded. She was half right. I didn't get mad. "Yeah," she said with a sad little smile. "I know, she really underestimated you. And that was it, really. She thought I was predictable. She thought my love and my commitment were things she could put on a shelf, take down when she wanted, and expect them to be there. She thought my boundaries were suggestions, not rules. I didn't set out to orchestrate some grand humiliating revenge. I just made a logical decision based on the data she gave me. She showed me, with her actions, that her past was more important to her than our future. So I gave her what she wanted. I gave her a future with her past. I'm dating someone new now. It's early, but it's different. It's built on honesty and clear lines. The other day, she asked me about my last relationship. I just told her the truth. I told her I was supposed to get married, but on the day of the wedding, I decided to go on my honeymoon alone instead. She laughed and said it was the most sensible, insane thing she had ever heard. And I guess it was. Sometimes, the most logical solution is the one that looks the craziest from the outside. But from where I'm standing, it looks like the best decision I ever made.